Welcome to Olympian Cares, giving you the best in water testing and analysis. Today we're looking at the New York Times, where lead tests on New York City schools' water may have masked the scope of the risk. So what is going on? We see a public school in Staten Island, and water samples have been taken from a fountain. There show concentrations of lead that far exceeded the EPA's regulations. So let's take a look and see what's going on. So the New York City school buildings were announced in July. Officials said that fewer than 1% of all the samples taken showed lead concentrations that exceeded the EPA's guidelines. Now here's the issue. When it comes to lead, there really is no safe amount. And given other safety measures in place, officials assured parents the water was safe to drink. But as we know from this channel, there's no water safe to drink with lead. A review of how testing was conducted suggests the amount of lead in the water that students consume could be greater than the results indicated. According to the city, every water outlet in the school was turned on fully for 2 hours. The night before the samples were taken, a practice known as pre-stagnation flushing that cleans most soluble lead and lead particles from pipes, thus reduces lead levels temporarily. But that's only temporarily, and the issue is, even if that works, there still could be traces of lead, and the pipes themselves aren't being replaced, so they could have older pipes, and then they flush it out. It looks good for a while. Maybe they got some samples initially, and it looks good, but then, down the line, more lead leaks into the water, and it causes problems. And this is especially dangerous to younger children, and it's dangerous to middle school students in this particular instance. In February, the EPA recommended against the use of pre-stagnation flushing when sampling water in homes, saying that the step may potentially lower the lead levels as compared to when it is not practiced. Because the EPA does not regulate the testing of water in schools, its guidance on pre-stagnation flushing does not apply directly to New York's procedures. But the agency's voluntary guidelines for schools do not recommend such flushing and generally direct schools to mimic normal consumption patterns when taking samples. The results should be thrown into the garbage and the city should start over, said Mark Edwards, and I would agree. A civil engineering professor at Virginia Tech who helped uncover dangerous high levels in lead in the water in Flint, Michigan, touching off scrutiny of drinking water across the city. This is very dangerous for this high school in Staten Island in New York because they're just flushing it out. And they're coming from professionals who have seen high levels of lead, who have seen the devastation that can happen when the water is not safe. And flushing is inappropriate anytime you want to assess lead concentrations coming out of individual taps. She said the water in schools is often stagnant for periods of time. After the school hours on weekends, holidays, and breaks, the idea is to test it under conditions similar to those in effect when children might drink it. That's how you know it's safe. Unless New York City schools flush every drinking water tap every evening for 2 hours routinely, which that's not likely, their sampling technique is both unreliable and scientifically and morally indefensible. And the purpose of a stagnation period, Mr. Cass said, is that it essentially acknowledges that there's going to be use of water. The day before, he continued, whether it's flushing or actual use is just use, and that's entirely what's intended by the overall testing protocol. Now, we can see over 510 of the city's 1,520 occupied school buildings had at least one outlet where the first draw water sample had a lead concentration over 15 parts per billion, ppb. And we can see the EPA's action level for lead in municipal water systems. And 153 buildings had at least one outlet where the second draw sample exceeded the cutoff. 8 buildings had at least one outlet where a first or second draw sample had lead concentration over 500 parts per billion. So this is very dangerous right here. Just flushing it out is a temporary way to fix things, and it's not a way to solve it long term. So that's why you always need proper and good testing from professionals who've been doing this for a long time, especially in cases like this where it's not being handled in a good way. That's why you should always have your water periodically tested and analyzed.